got permission.
Okay, you got to
So
put it
now-
on there too. Okay, how we doing with everybody on?
Let's
I'm making dinner.
let everybody in.
Okay.
See our speakers in. That's a good sign.
Uh-huh.
That is a good sign. Well, what time is it? I mean, my watch died. We'll give it a few more minutes before we actually start with like introductions and stuff. And that gives people time to have technological difficulties.
Well, and that'll give everybody a chance to put their email in the chat. Is that,
Okay.
Only those for the
have a
nurses.
list of who's on the,
And then the people that are doing CBIS points still have to go to the website, download the form and send it to me and I'll send them their certificate. Otherwise, oh, why am I drawing a blank? Who's sponsored?
Rainbow?
Rainbow. Rainbow is going to take care of all the other CEUs.
yeah, but they need your email in the chat so that they can send you the survey, the evaluation.
So just for anybody who doesn't know me very well, my job tonight is to pick on Steve. So just,
And what makes tonight different from other meetings?
there's more people on to know I'm doing it.
I just entered my email into the chat box, but I don't know what else I have to do.
Just that.
Yeah,
That's
I
it?
see Rena, yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
have to hit file or anything?
Oh,
No.
yeah, you're going to still go to the website and do either the PDF form or a Word form and send it
Yep.
to me.
Yep.
And then I will send you the CBIS points.
Gotcha.
We'll still give it a few minutes before we do introductions, just to give people time. And I'm not sure, Steve, is it Steve or Sandy that's letting people in now?
Well, Steve, are
I
you?
don't know if Sandy can. I don't have anybody else.
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't have anything on my end that's saying let anybody in, so, because I'm
okay.
host this time, but,
Well, I can tell if somebody's recording it, I think, right?
yeah,
Okay.
it's recording. So hopefully,
This is Amy with Rainbow. I just wanted to reiterate, we can provide 1.5 CEs for nurses, social work, and CCM. And the CBIS will be on their certificate as well. So
Wonderful.
if you need all that, just put your name and email into the chat box and I'll write it down and I'll send you the evaluation and then the certificate once we receive it.
Cool.
Hey, Steve, can you put my Roxy C email in there, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. I know you have that, so.
So are we only entering emails in there if we need the continuing ed credits for attendance?
Correct.
yes.
Yes. Okay, well, I think, we're about 5 minutes in. We can at least start with the introductions. And I apologize. I'm going to have to rely on people that are actually in front of a computer because my phone only shows me 4 people at a time and I'm one of them. And I'm pretty sure I know I'm on. So what we'll do is
I'll announce everybody. So you just announce yourself, I'll announce myself, and then I'll tell everybody else to announce themselves.
what if I want to announce myself and you?
Then you can do that.
Okay. So as we start these meetings, we usually do an introduction of ourselves and any changes, announcements, anything like that. We want to make sure it's always different with this virtual session, but we want to make sure we still have the opportunity to share our information, and it's a different form of networking, but at least it's networking. Most of you know, I'm Roxanne Goldamer. I am the president of the Brain Injury Network of Northern Michigan. What some of you may not know is I changed jobs again. So I am now working for Beacon Specialized Living Services. I am the vice president of operations for the North region, which means I am in my car a lot because my territory goes from Holland all the way through the west side of the state and up to Escanaba is our furthest away home. So my world has changed a little bit from traumatic brain injury to more of the CMH clientele and developmental disabilities, but TBI will always have a place in my heart, near and dear. So a couple of things that I wanted to make sure that we mentioned is that we have been meeting as a conference planning committee, because this October would have been our big conference that we would have done for professionals. However, with the probability of it being at least partially virtual, we did vote as the conference committee to hold off until 2022. We are still going to be meeting on a regular basis to make sure that we get everything planned and in good ways. We really want to bring in some good speakers. So if there's any suggestions, ideas, we definitely would like to take those in account. And then I also, before Steve likes to take away my microphone and pass it on to somebody else, I want to make sure that everybody remembers we do have that grant money. So as all the changes, whoa, I'm getting blinded by the sunlight here. As all the changes come into play with auto no fault, if there's an equipment that you know, one of your clients needs, or if there's a service that they're really doing, we need to have the professionals just submit a grant request, and we as a board will look it over and approve it. We've got some money. We would like to make sure that it's going to those that really need it and can benefit from it. So I am going to now introduce Steve Purkis, our treasurer, so that he can introduce himself.
I'm Steve Purkis. I'm the treasurer and webmaster. I work for CRC. We do technology for independence, anything to do with home automation, anything to do with computers, whatnot. We help set up, purchase, and whatever. Sandy?
Sandy Smith with E3 Case Managers. I'm also the one of the facilitators for the Alpena Brain Injury Support Group and Education Committee for Brain Injury Network of Northern Michigan, and Outreach Committee member for Brain Injury Network of Northern Michigan. Welcome.
Amy?
Oh, hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I'm Amy Gelso with Rainbow Rehab. I know most of you probably are familiar with Rainbow, provide a lot of different services from pediatric to adults with outpatient, residential, telehealth, home and community. A couple new things that Rainbow has. We actually opened up a new Waterford clinic, and we have a new substance use disorder program as well in the Ann Arbor area. So those are a couple new things that we have going on at Rainbow. And thank you for having us. Sandy, thank you so much for all of your help with us.
Yes,
Getting
thank
this
you
going.
for
Thank
agreeing.
T. Bogle? I'm only reading what's on the screen, so I don't know.
No problem. It's Tammy Bogle. I'm the program coordinator with Neuro Restorative. Not too much is going on with us. We're on day 2 of our CARF survey, so hopefully all goes well on that.
And Sarah?
Sarah Pranger with Beacon Therapies. I'm the program director there. We provide a broad range of community reintegrative programs, from vocational placement and training services to therapeutic recreation, and mostly just a big focus on community reintegration for individuals with traumatic brain injury. We do a few workers' comp as well, but primarily brain injury.
Okay. Dana?
Hi, Dana Earl from Advent Home Medical. We're Director of Sales and Marketing. We're a high-tech respiratory DME specializing in home ventilation. We also have a home delivery pharmacy, and we service the state of Michigan. We have an office in Petoskey, and our main office is down Auburn Hills, Pontiac area. We also have offices in Lansing and Grand Rapids. So happy to be here.
Okay. Kathleen?
Hi, this is Kathleen, and I'm have been a case manager and for too many years to remember. And my focus has always been on catastrophic injuries, mainly TBI. And I'm kind of in a retirement phase, down to 3 clients, and that's all I have to say. Other than I'm a founding member of the Brain Injury Network of Northern Michigan, and on the conference committee.
Thank you. Carrie?
Which Carrie is that?
Hi, I'm joined tonight by my cat Oswald. I am an occupational therapist at Therapy Solutions. I've been there about 5 years. So
Like you do, right?
excited to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Susan?
Sorry, it took me a minute. I'm Susan Brinklow. I'm the clinical director at the Lighthouse Neurological Rehab. You're only seeing my ceiling and I'm okay with that. Our news is that we, unfortunately, JC Bailey has been our social work. Not unfortunately, she has been. JC Bailey has been our social worker. She's moving on to new adventures. And we just secured a new licensed professional counselor. Her name is Ruby. And she's got lots of great experience. So we're really excited. She's starting on Monday.
Okay. And Amy Doobie?
Hey, Ralph.
Hit the wrong button. Amy Doobie, occupational therapist, owner of Therapy Solutions. We have OT, PT, speech, massage, folk rehab, on the brain injury board, and looking for tonight's meeting. Is going to sound good.
Okay. And I believe Jennifer, right? Romberger?
There's two Jennifers.
Romberger.
Hi, I'm Jen Romberger, and I am a program manager at Neurorestorative.
All right. And Jen Smith.
Hi, Jen Smith with Smith RN Group for Case Management.
Okay. And Beth, I think we missed you. You're way up on top. Beth?
You did miss me. Hi, Beth Flamboy. I am a speech pathologist and I work with Amy Doobie and Carrie there at Therapy Solutions. Kudos to Amy for working out on the elliptical during a meeting. Way to multitask, huh? I'm just sitting here enjoying a dog on my lap and some candles and you guys. So looking forward to it.
Okay. Carolyn
Did
Scott?
we say Rena? I have this.
Didn't we do Rena already? Oh, you must have moved. No,
I was cooking. Hi,
go ahead, Rena.
I'm Rena Hicks from Rebalance Center Massage Therapy. It's pretty much me and Kayla Gordon. And we work with folks, open and billable auto claims. And we feel like we're a pretty good integral part of the rehab team. We are still operational. Although that's not always easy. And one thing I wanted to mention was there's a group called Trans Friendly, and it's a way to make your business listing with like identifying that you are open to trans clients. And I think you get like a sticker and there's a certain like listing hierarchy or tiers, and they're going to be launching really soon. A person named Morgan is putting that together. So anyone interested, I put my email in there in the chat. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, just let me know and I can send a link to you.
Okay, thank you. Brenda?
Hello, I'm Brenda Pomeroy. I'm with the Lighthouse Rehabilitation Center along with Susan. And this is my first time joining a meeting, so I'm excited. I am more located at our Carroll location, but I do travel to both the Traverse City Kingsley location and then obviously the Carroll as well. So I look forward to hearing what these meetings pertain to.
Okay.
Welcome.
Daniel Knight?
Dan?
Yep, sorry about that. I had another program pop up. I'm Dan Knight at Elephant Strides ABA, and I am a behavior therapist / behavior analyst.
Okay. These names jump around, so I might have missed somebody. Who else is here that I missed? Did we catch everybody? I think there's 19 people here. Okay, I think we got everybody.
That's what I got.
I do want to mention that memberships will be renewing in July. Make sure you renew. I will be sending emails accordingly for corporate or single members. We have 7 single memberships and 21 corporate members as of now for this year. And I think that's it. And I think the CBIS points, if you want to put your email address in the chat, Rainbow will send a form for you to fill out, and they will send you a certificate for all the CEUs that we're giving tonight. Rainbow is doing that. Roxanne, I'm giving you the microphone.
Okay. I'm good. I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us. I know that the adaptations that we as a group, as well as individual companies, have had to make in the world of COVID have made things a little bit more challenging, but I'm really glad that people are still coming together and taking this opportunity to hear what's going on with each other, as well as getting some great learning opportunities from some of the other professionals in the area. And it's all about networking and sharing what resources we've got for the betterment of the people that we serve. So thank you for all of that. I do believe if we were able to queue it up, that we have a legislative update that was sent from Martha Lewandowski. Is that getting queued up by?
Did we get the password?
No.
No.
Okay.
There was a passcode. We couldn't get it queued up, but when she does send it, we're going to post it on the Facebook page.
And the website.
And the website.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the website is braininjurynorth.com, as is the Facebook.
And so we work really hard to make sure that we're able to communicate, different support groups that are out there, and just really, and I kind of want to go into a little bit more of a description, because we do have some new people on that haven't been here before, and we're thrilled to have you with us. But we really try to do a lot of communication as to what's going on for the people that we serve, or the people that are also caring for them. It's kind of a dual surface where we're marketing, networking with each other, as well as making sure we're doing the utmost that we can. In this ever-changing world of COVID, we do need to make sure that we are staying safe as professionals, keeping our clientele safe, but also still maintaining the professionalism and ability to do things like this. So I apologize for those that didn't hear in the beginning that I am still in the car, but I didn't quite make it to Steve's house to be able to do this together. So thank you, Steve, for kind of footing the biggest brunt of this load. I do appreciate it. I know our speaker is on. We are running a little bit early unless there's some other announcements. And if not, then we can just go right to the speaker if Sandy wants to introduce our speaker.
And actually, Amy asked if she could do it since she works with her. So Amy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I apologize. My Great Dane is being a big baby today, is like right on my lap, so I apologize for that. Again, thank you so much for having us today. I'll introduce Carolyn. I just want to read her bio, so I apologize. I'm going to read it. Dr. Scott provides neuropsychological and psychological services at Rainbow, working with residential and outpatient clients. She conducts both brief and expanded neuropsychological evaluations, as well as group and individual psychotherapy. Dr. Scott also provides consultation services on client and team matters. In addition to her clinical responsibilities, Dr. Scott is involved in administrative and educational activities, including the coordination of a committee which examines ethical, clinical, and financial risks and promotes achievement of patient goals. She also oversees the direction of an ongoing educational series for therapists throughout Rainbow. Dr. Scott earned her Ph.D. in clinical psychology at Wayne State after she completed her APA-approved internship at the John D. Dingle VA Medical Center in Detroit. She then completed specialized postdoctoral training in neuropsychology and rehabilitation psychology at RIM, Rehab Institute of Michigan. During this training, Dr. Scott worked with individuals, both inpatient and outpatient, who had experienced traumatic brain injuries, stroke, spinal cord injuries, and other neurological and orthopedic conditions. So at this time, I'll introduce Dr. Scott. She's amazing, and we love that she works at Rainbow.
Oh, thank you. it's nice to get pumped up right before your before I talk, right? And it sounds like you guys are doing great organization, great work. Also, I think that networking piece is so important. And with changes coming down the pipeline, I think that, you know, all of us working together is going to become more and more important. So I am going to try and share my slides. Normally I get to do this with an IT person sitting right next to me. So if I have a little trouble, I have practiced many times, but if I do have a little bit of trouble, give me a little chance here. Oh, actually, it looks like you guys need to allow me for my screen.
And Dr. Scott, I know throughout your presentation, you wanted the attendees to participate. Do you want them to unmute themselves and speak, or would you like them to put something in the chat? What do you think would be best?
You know what, I feel like we have a pretty good sized group. So if you guys just, and I've got a gallery view, I'm looking at a couple different screens. So, but if you have a question and I don't see you popping up, please feel free to stop, you know, just jump in there, not a problem. Also, I am going to be asking a couple questions. So a few times maybe you'll raise your hand and I'll try and look at everybody. I am on my computer screen, so I see a few more than those four pictures that we were talking about earlier. But I would, you know, ethics is a kind of a, I think most people like talking about ethics. It's kind of an exciting one to talk about. So if you have scenarios and situations, and we're actually going to go through some scenarios, and feel free to unmute yourself in those times, and we'll talk about using strategies. I'll cue you guys too.
I think I made you able to share the screen, and if everybody else wants to mute so we don't get interrupted that way too, that'd be great.
And it looks like it should be good. Oh, hold on. You know what?
There we go. We're on. We had it.
We did. I disabled it because I needed to make sure I shared my sound so you guys could hear what I was saying also. Okay. So that should be good. All righty. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. And when I do play the videos, or if I'm talking and you guys can't hear me, or if I'm going too fast, feel free to stop me and let me know. We will get started talking about this topic of ethics and creating an ethical environment in your group specifically. And so this is really kind of a fun topic. And this the talk actually originated when Lynn Browers, who some of you may know, she's been on the west side of the state. She's working for Rainbow and partially retired now. But Lynn was writing an article about disorders of consciousness and some ethics issues for our magazine, Rainbow Visions. And she sat down with Jill, who is our wonderful kind of graphic designer, and she does a lot of our marketing. And they had, you know, the classic devil on one shoulder, angel on the other. And they realized that that didn't really ring true. That, you know, ethics and in the field we work in, there are a lot of gray areas. And so I like, if you'll notice, you're going to have little businessmen in suits wearing halos and carrying pitchforks, because there's a little bit of both in both kinds of situations. So so we will talk about both of those. All right. Hold on, my screen just changed. I might just have to deal with it. All right. So let's start by talking about the top 3 ethical concerns in that people have identified. And this is actually an article, this comes from an article in the archives of PM&R in 2001. It was Kirshner and Stocking, and they did a kind of some research on ethics that people are identifying in a healthcare setting. And the top 3 were pressures resulting from healthcare reimbursement. No surprise there, probably. Conflicts among patients and physicians and team members or families about goal setting, also probably not too much of a surprise for us. And difficulty assessing decision-making capacity. And I know personally, this is one that I personally struggle with. It's one of my, the things that's on my heart the heaviest when I'm doing these evaluations, because the idea of saying that someone's not capable of making their decisions anymore is something that we really need to consider. And one that I think is still developing in Michigan, kind of catching up, so we can just talk about decision-making in one area. You know, they need a guardian for this rather than the whole shebang, which was what we typically see here. Now, Kirshner and Stocking also found that most people preferred to engage in a conversation about ethics rather than listen to a lecture. So that is why, as Amy mentioned, I will have a couple times where I'm going to have you guys jump in and give your opinion on how situations are going, or maybe you know, situations that you've come across. And that might be a little difficult. And if it goes poorly, we can always switch to chat. But, you know, this conversation is something that I think a lot of us are missing a year into COVID, that chance to talk with your colleagues and hash things out that you might be doing informally. And so we'll try and recreate some of that tonight. We'll also have some time for discussion at the end too. So I want you guys to raise your hand if you have a case that wakes you up in the middle of the night, or something that you can't stop thinking about. And I guess it doesn't have to be a recent case. It could be a case that, you know, was a year later. Yep, I've got some hands popping up already, right? This is not something surprising to most of us, you know, and most of us, if you have worked long enough in rehab, you've probably raised your hand, right? I can think of two in particular in my case, that still you kind of wonder what happened. So what what you're feeling is this idea of moral distress. And this concept was first researched actually back in the 1980s. And it was developed amongst the nurse population. They started to find this with nurses, but then they've replicated it many times over with different health professionals as well. And it's this phenomena that you can't kind of carry out what you believe to be the ethically appropriate action because of institutional constraints. So perhaps, you know, I can remember early on in my training, watching clients that didn't have any insurance. This was before Obamacare, you know, the ACA, clients that didn't have anything would be discharged and have to say, well, hey, you can go to this place and you might be able to find a shower chair. You can go to this place and, you know, maybe you'll find a wheelchair. And here's some home exercise programs. And maybe when your Medicaid kicks in, and however long that takes, then you can come back and get some therapy, right? And there weren't resources for some of our clients versus, you know, our clients that had insurance or other ways of funding. So that can certainly be part of it. The inability to provide necessary treatments, right? So we've all been told no when we want to pursue something, or you know, just that inability. Maybe we don't have the specialty services that are necessary. Another one that kind of comes up a lot is prolonged aggressive treatment, where the professionals no longer think that the treatment is appropriate, but the family is really pushing, right? There's you just haven't tried it all, or maybe if we go to another provider, they'll have better answers, or and we've probably all seen that, right? Where the family just hasn't kind of come to terms with what is going on, or the giving up of too soon, right? So all of these things, and moral distress can really be kind of the driving force that leads to requests for ethics consults, and in larger organizations. And then I imagine even if you know, don't have an ethics kind of formal ethics committee in your organizations, there is some mechanism or avenue for having these conversations. So because of these institutional constraints, we end up a lot of times, you know, this moral distress, it might dissipate because the situation has gone away, but you're left with that icky feeling. So for those of you that raised your hand, you know, that might have been something that happened 5-10 years ago, but because it couldn't be resolved fully, you still have that ick, right? That moral residue. And that can really have a negative impact on an employee's sense of well-being, especially when there are not those ethics review committees, our hot case committee, which, you know, we talk about challenging issues, those sorts of things. So Kirshner and Stocking contended that, you know, it's really doubtful that we would ever get rid of moral distress entirely in a healthcare setting, right? We deal with too many important life issues. So because of this, it's really important that we have a way to have these ethical decisions and to talk about these ethical scenarios and a place to voice them. So very few of us, you know, based on I just heard what everyone did, very few of us work in a vacuum, right, with a patient. We're in healthcare systems, we are in programs, we are working just as a group of professionals in general. And so we are really talking about making ethical decisions as a group, or within kind of a set environment, and that what is right and what is wrong becomes a lot more complicated when you have these institutional or environmental demands, right? So when you have to think about, hey, can we cover our costs? Or does this decision, yeah, this might be good for the client, but it puts our staff in harm's way. Does this put our environment at risk for litigation? So all of these things have to be considered. So there are a couple different strategies we are going to talk about, and we're going to talk about them over and over because repetition is a great way to learn. And we're going to start with the front page test. So the front page test is also called the New York Times rule, and Warren Buffett actually proposed it. And his quote was, "Contemplating any business act, an employee should ask whether he or she would be willing to see it immediately described by an informed and critical reporter on the front page of his local paper, there to be read by his or her spouse, children, and friends." So it's that idea of how badly would that play out, right? If you were on, you know, the Problem Solvers on any one of our local news channels, would you want that there, right? Would you want to be on the New York Times or the Detroit Free Press, or, you know, do you want your name associated with that? And I have a colleague who tells a really good story. She was working at a very large organization in the state, and she was working with a spinal cord injured patient, and they were talking about, one of their goals, she was a rehab counselor, and one of their goals was on intimacy and approaching members, individuals that he was attracted to, and how to have those conversations. So she's like, well, this is great. I'll take him to a strip club. He's been wanting to go anyways, and we'll get a chance to practice those skills because he can talk to somebody, and, we'll see how he manages sexuality. And she's telling her, she's newer in her career, and she's telling her supervisor, and they looked at her and said, no, no, this is going to play out horribly. You can't do that. You can't take clients. I understand what you're thinking, but imagine how it would look if it came out that our organization took clients to a strip club, right? Now, this was a number of years ago, and I think actually there's probably some changes here. But we can think of a lot of examples. A client that, elopes and goes and uses a whole bunch of drugs and gets themselves into trouble, right? How does that look for us, right? As an organization? Not great, because you can't provide care. Obviously, now we all know clients occasionally elope, right? But it doesn't look good to anyone else, right? The other one that I want to talk about is something called the golden rule. And this is the strategy, or the story that we have all heard, or the rule that we've all heard: treat other people as you would wish to be treated. It's this ethic of reciprocity. And it's actually embedded in all the major religions and philosophies. And it seems like a really good strategy at first. but there are some suggestions otherwise. So in 2014, Cathari and Kirshner wrote an article titled Abandoning the Golden Rule, the Problem of Putting Ourselves in the Patient's Place. And it was published in Topics in Stroke Rehab. And they found that clinicians were actually not very good at predicting what stroke survivors would want related to life-sustaining therapies or quality of life judgments. There's this idea of kind of the disability paradox, where clients with disabilities rate their quality of life as good, whereas healthy individuals would state that they would not want that same quality of life. And there's a popular press example of this. I don't know if anyone can raise your hand or not, either way, but if you've read the book Still Alice or seen the movie, it's a great book. I'm going to ruin it a little bit for you, but yep, I got one hand. I read this book. It's thin. It's a quick, easy read. It's about a woman a neuroscientist who develops early onset dementia, early Alzheimer's. And I loved it. It was a page turner, and I was reading it while, taking my kid to dance, and I've got tears running down my face. But this idea is that what was important to a character at one point, what she thought was her quality of life, as her dementia progresses, she has a very different view. And so what we might think as clinicians, as case managers, as whatever our role is on that treatment team, what we value may change. And same for our clients. We try and write our wills, we try and write all these things, but we don't know what it's really gonna look like should something happen. So, we really need to discuss that quality of life with our clients and think about how we view that after what that would be like after a catastrophic injury or with a debilitating condition. The other one that we're going to talk about a lot, and actually I'm going to come back to that one, is the celibate model. And this is just a little mnemonic device to help you remember. It's clinical, ethics, and legal issues bait all therapists equally, meaning that we can all get sucked in and potentially make big mistakes. And so we really have to think these ethical issues through. So they have a model that really helps us kind of work through these ethical situations. So for those of you that raised your hand earlier, those of you that had a situation that caused moral distress, take a moment to think about that situation while we're kind of reviewing these steps. So first is defining the problem. And that sounds dumb, but a lot of times, especially when you're working with a team, individuals may consider different things the problem, right? So we really need to be clear on what is the exact ethical concern. Is it that a guardian isn't, providing documentation of the client's money and how the money is being spent? Is it that the client feels that they're being, cheated? What is the issue? What are the facts? Who are the interested parties? Why are they interested, right? For those of us who have worked in rehab a while, we have all seen wonderful families and interested parties, and we have all probably seen interested parties that maybe don't have the client's best interest at heart, right? So we really have to kind of think all these situations, all these different scenarios through. We need to think about legal issues, right? Because the legal system and the ethics, sometimes those don't mesh perfectly, right? We want to brainstorm possible action steps, choose kind of a course of action and go with it. It's really important to go through all these kind of steps to make sure we aren't missing anything. So we're going to switch gears for a minute, and we're going to start talking about some different kind of ethical scenarios. We're going to go through 3, and we'll watch these little short video clips. We'll talk a little bit about the cases that advanced itself. And then that's when I want you guys to kind of chip in with your 2 cents and how you feel like things are going. So we are going to talk about Jahai McMath. She was declared brain dead in the state of California. And, oh, hold on. Her family said, well, no, she's not dead. She's just profoundly disabled. Unfortunately, it sounds like something went wrong and it wasn't really clear. The grandmother tried to get involved. She was a nurse. And the parents would not accept the hospital recommendation to take her off the ventilator. The hospital also would not put in a feeding tube or a trach. And their quote was that it would be unethical and grotesque to ask the doctors to provide further medical care to a dead body. So you can kind of imagine how that might have felt as a family member to hear something like that. Now, all 50 states have some version of the Uniform Determination of Death Act, but there is some variability in between the states. 4 states allow some degree of conscientious objection. New Jersey state law actually allows for a religious objection to the declaration of death on the basis of neurological criteria. The other ones are Arizona, Virginia, and North Carolina, in case you are kind of keeping track. So knowing what we know, kind of that little bit of background, let me play you a little clip about Jahai.
She is out of the hospital now, still attached to a ventilator, rolling down a dark highway in a private ambulance. Her destination is still a secret, but Jahai McMath's future is just as certain as it was several weeks ago. She is medically dead, according to doctors. Only a machine can keep her heart from stopping. Yet her family has refused to accept it, and even now speaks in optimistic tones.
I hope to have her come.
She is out of the hospital now, still attached to a ventilator, rolling down a dark highway in a private ambulance. Her destination is still a secret, but Jahai McMath's future is just as certain as it was several weeks ago. She is medically dead, according to doctors. Only a machine can keep her heart from stopping. Yet her family has refused to accept it, and even now speaks in optimistic tones.
I hope to have her come back home with 100% full recovery.
Jahai's mother has said she'll never let her go.
She's not a corpse up there. It is a pretty 13-year-old girl up there that I gave life to.
So together, she and her family's attorney secured what they believe is a victory to get the teenager to a long-term facility that will look over Jahai indefinitely. Where exactly she's been taken, they will not say, because this case has produced such volatile rhetoric.
We've had people make threats from around the country. It's sad that people act that way. So for Jahai's safety and those around her, we will not be saying where she went or where she is.
We do know, however, that a rehab center for brain injuries in New York has publicly welcomed her.
This little angel is a true survivor. She's a strong little girl, 8th grade, 13 years old. She's in there and she's fighting all the way. Her heart's beating, strong, the power of prayer. She can come through this.
And these kinds of statements, medical ethicists say, are the problem and does the family no favors.
I mean, this is a tragedy of huge proportions. Anyone who has lost a child, our sympathies have to go out to them. But I think to be most sympathetic is not to perpetuate this intermediate state.
But attorney Chris Dolan, who has been the family's fiercest advocate, insists this is about parental choice, about who has the final say on pulling the plug.
What this family wanted was a chance. And I think that what's real important to understand is why this legal action was really about. It was about this girl named Jahai, but it was also about every parent in the United States who should have the right to make that choice. Not a hospital who comes in and says, today is the day your daughter dies.
And therein lies the problem, say doctors and ethicists, because Jahai did die nearly a month ago. And so continues the tug of war between a grieving family and those who subscribe to painful medical.
All right, so it ended up cutting us off a little bit there at the end, but you saw the gist of it. And obviously this is just it's a horrible case. And anytime you have children involved, I think it even pulls people's heartstrings a little bit more. But they, many neurologists had ruled that Jahai was brain dead. But Alan Schumann, who is a neurologist, a pediatric neurologist at UCLA, did not. He stated that, he watched over 4 dozen independent videos that he received from the family, and in 2017 declared her technically alive since she followed some movement commands and had started puberty. The originating hospital maintained that the original diagnosis was correct. And, this really demonstrates some of the difficulty with diagnoses with disorders of consciousness. The 2018 practice guidelines discuss really the importance, oh my goodness, the importance of using standardized measures. So like the JFK Coma Recovery Scale revised, and treating, individuals who are very familiar with treating disorders of consciousness, dealing with these situations. And, not to be cynical at all, but there's a lot more at stake in this situation. Certainly what the attorney referenced in terms of parents, rights. But if you remember, the family claimed that she was profoundly disabled and not dead, and the family sued the original hospital. And California law has a $250,000 cap on awards if the patient died in the hospital, but no cap for severe disability. And I am absolutely not saying the family was driven by economic concerns in this case, but many of us who have worked in rehab have probably seen instances where patient care was not always the primary motivation of family members. Unfortunately, in 2018, Jahai did end up passing due to kidney and liver failure. So hold on to that scenario. We will talk about it in a minute. We're going to watch another one. You have maybe seen this kind of scenario or heard about the case of Bobby Reyes. In 2019, in September of 2019, he was a 14-year-old boy. He had an asthma attack and he attempted to use his inhaler, but it wasn't helpful. So his mom, who we'll see in the next slide, called 911 and started to drive him to the fire department, which was right down the road. Survival flight took him to CS Mott Children's Hospital, and tests on September 24th, so this was 3 days later, demonstrated that he didn't have any brain or brainstem function. There was no cerebral perfusion. EEG showed no activity at all. They declared that he was brain dead, and I don't know why my slides are advancing all by themselves. Declared he was brain dead, and the hospital said they would take him off life support 3 days later. So let's listen to his mom for a minute here.
I would like this a week or two. It hasn't even been a week. We just want him. We can't lose him. We love him so much. And he's so young, and we believe we're people of faith. So many people praying for him that he's going to pull through, and we just want to give him time to give us time to get our miracle.
So Ms. Jones actually took U of M to court on September 30th and to the Washtenaw County 22nd Circuit Court. And they issued a order delaying the removal of life support. There was a physician who did med school.
I would like this
at U of M, and he he came and provided some testimony that he did not think this was right. It's better to err on the side of life. The family ended up, Terry Schiavo, if you remember that case, her brother came and helped to kind of advocate for the family. So it became very contentious, as would be expected, but also you can just feel the emotion that poor mother is experiencing right there. So, the family was really fighting. The hospital wanted to have a second test to demonstrate these things again, that there was no perfusion, there was no EEG. And the family really fought that. They said it didn't matter because his organs were functioning, his blood pressure fluctuated, he had once opened his eyes. U of M took a little bit of a different track. So here's what they said, and I want to read it. I really apologize. I don't know what's going on. I want to read this because I read to you what they said at UCLA, that it would be grotesque to provide services to a dead body. And this was Michigan's response. Families facing situations involving determination of brain death face unfathomable heartbreak. All of us empathize with an extraordinarily emotional process that families facing such matters go through. Our multidisciplinary teams, including ethics experts, study every case individually. If extensive testing shows that there's irreversible cessation of all brain functions, including the brainstem, continuing medical interventions is appropriate and violates the professional standards of Michigan medicine. If another facility provides technology or services not available at Michigan Medicine and the facility is willing to accept the patient, our team will work diligently to facilitate that transfer. So both the hospital and Bobby's family started looking very quickly at transfer options. They did. A physician in Phoenix agreed to take the case, and then the healthcare system said, oh, no, right? We were talking about individuals versus ethical decision-making for the entire facility. So Michigan again said, and this is now 20 plus days after we're going to take him off life support. And family really bargained again, so they gave him another week to try and find another solution. And, they ended up, Michigan's again reiterated kind of this situation. The judge ended up lifting the stay that prevented Mott from doing the second test, which they did. There were some issues with jurisdiction for the case. And ultimately, Bobby was taken off life support on October 15th after the second test was conducted and his family was at his bedside. There was another case, in 2019, 16-year-old at Beaumont Hospital. His name was Titus Cromer. The hospital wanted to remove life support because he had irreversible cessation of brain damage or irreversible cessation of function in the brain. But family went to court arguing he was regulating his body temperature and his blood pressure. This played out a little differently than the Bobby Reyes case. Beaumont was willing to put in a trach and a peg tube and they transferred him to a SNF actually. And he reportedly really struggled and ended up passing away 4 days after he was transferred there. So in the 1950s, positive pressure ventilators allowed doctors to extend the lives of people who would have died. And in the 1960s, with more success with organ transplantation, and then in 1967, Harvard kind of convenes this committee to kind of consider the ethical problems created by the hopelessly unconscious patient. In 1968, this ad hoc committee at Harvard to examine the definition of brain death described that as permanently non-functioning brain. It was unresponsive, apneic, and absent brainstem reflexes. Any organ, they said, that has no possibility of functioning again is for all practical purposes dead, okay? So essentially, they defined irreversible coma as the new criterion for death also, though. And the debate has ever kind of been going on ever since that, was there a motivation to resolve when to remove life support, or was it to increase access to transplantable organs? And so this is kind of another situation, right, where we're talking about, it's just like, what is the motivation? We hate to be cynical, we hate to question, but those of us that have been in this field long enough know that you kind of do have to ask those questions, right? There are 8,000 donors declared dead based on neurological criteria each year, and 64,000 lives are saved. So the Michigan Determination of Death Act states that that there is that irreversible cessation of circulatory and respiratory functions, or the irreversible cessation of all function of the entire brain, including the brainstem. So for Jahai's case, the family argued that she wasn't dead, just disabled. With Bobby and Titus, the family argued that he could still recover, right? So there were both kind of those arguments that were jumping the gun, right? And again, these are kids, right? So that complicates things even more. So let's talk about these two cases. This is a chance for you guys to unmute. And let's start first with this front page test, okay? So now both organizations, those hospital systems, all three, Beaumont, U of M, and UCLA, all made it to the front page, right? Sometimes front page coverage is good, even controversy, right? Like there's no bad press, but in these cases, the press wasn't so good, right? So let me take a poll here. How do you guys feel like, how do you feel that UCLA did if we're thinking about the front page test in the case of Jahai McMath? Feel free to chip in, or verbally, I guess.
Well, I think that media has an agenda of all of their own.
Well, that's true too.
I don't think they're looking at necessarily the medical side of it. I think they're looking for sensationalism.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really look at what the media says. I look at more what the medical system is telling me about the facts of the case.
And I think that's a great point, right? Because there is, you know, especially with news that runs continuously, right? You got to sell the story, you got to make it interesting. And like I said before, you know, kids, anytime kids are injured, it's a little more juicy, so to speak. What do you think about that statement, though, that it would be grotesque to provide services to a dead body?
I think that was really insensitive.
I agree.
Yeah, terribly.
I'm seeing a lot of head shaking.
Absolutely. There's a different way of putting that without using the word grotesque.
Yeah. Yep. And even hearing that your loved one is a dead body, right? Like that's just something that pulls the heartstrings a little bit there. What about like the Michigan? They gave a much longer kind of blurb. What do you guys think about that?
I think that was handled in a much more sensitive way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. Right. I'd much rather, if they were talking about my family, I'd much rather that be the statement versus the UCLA one. So do you think, I don't know, did you guys see any of this coverage of the cases? What did you guys think when that was playing out? Did it look bad? And Jennifer, you brought up a great point that we're a little probably different as medical professionals because we're listening for different things versus the general population.
Well, my thought always is to what kind of education is provided to these families. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've dealt with cases like this in the past. And so I wonder how much they're counseled and talked to about the reality of there are fates a lot worse than death. And I don't know how much is involved in that in the acute care setting, as far as education about what's going on with the brain. I sometimes think they're very point blank and this is the way it is and they're dead. And I think these families need a lot more care in the way they're educated about what's really happened to their loved one.
And you know, it's kind of difficult for us because to evaluate this because we are medical professionals and we see all sides of the story. But in the case of the first little girl, I mean, this was, and the boy too, it was so sudden. Everything was so sudden that, you know, here she goes in for a tonsillectomy and this happens to her, or he goes through an anaphylactic reaction to his asthma. And I mean, he's probably had asthma attacks many other times, but, you know, for us to actually say something or to try to evaluate whether it's ethical or whether it was handled well or not, we can put ourselves in their place, but we have knowledge and we've seen people that have gone to home care places or extended care or rehab facilities, whatever placement, and we've seen them there for years. And, so we can look at the broader picture, but I think taking some time rather than forcing people to make a decision within a few days is very valuable.
And as a medical professional, I've been through this on a personal nature with my own father, where one doctor was saying he'll be fine after a cardiac arrest, after a bypass. He'll be perfect, he'll be 100%. And then another person's telling us, well, I knew from my medical training, he was not going to be fine. And so you're right. It's we have this medical knowledge that tells us differently, but a lot of families don't have that. So if there's a sensitivity that has to go about how you communicate with these people for them to come, like you say, Kathleen, come to that decision, or whoever that was.
And what do you do with that conflicting information, right? So if you are the providers, how do you provide reasonable information that's at a level that people who don't have medical experience, right, or medical background can really understand? And how is it consistent? We need some consistent messaging, because for you to hear two separate things, how do you know what to do with that, right? And then you turn to other sources who aren't necessarily, I mean, not in your case, but if you start looking up WebMD or whatever else, right? We all know the dangers of Googling symptoms, right? I had a client just the other day who told me you had read a report and he's got a brain injury and he said something about flat affect. And so he Googled that and it told him he had schizophrenia, and then he was like, oh my gosh, I have schizophrenia and a brain injury. And I never knew, and I'm 50. And it's like, no, you don't worry, but you got to be real careful when you're.
But let's face it, Carolyn, that most of our medical professionals are, I'm sorry to say this, but our MDs are not trained in how to speak to families about this, what you're saying.
Yep.
They're not. They're very much in a box.
Yeah. Sarah, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just thinking, I mean, I see these kids on there, and I think as rehabilitation specialists, all of us have at least that one client that's the medical miracle, and they weren't supposed to live, and their family's pushing through saying, no, just give us another week. Let's just give it a little bit of time to see if they recover. I think that warrants enough. Like on one of those clips, one physician had said, you should just err on the side of life. And I think when you see young kids come in, I mean, I just wonder how much of this is hospital policy, just as a cookie cutter, one shoe fits all. And I think there has to be some understanding that there's not a one size fits all in brain injury. Every shoe is a different size depending on the day. And so I think maybe there's got to be some more training just in that area I think that physician's right. I think when you're talking about somebody's little baby, their child, you need to be understanding, and you're a hospital. I guess I agree. You should be erring on the side of life. And if this family is begging for, hey, can we just wait a week? It's only been 4 days. I think I agree with them. I think there needs to be something else other than to say, hey, I'm sorry, they're dead. It's only been 3 days and their body's still regulating certain things. So there must be something going on in their brain, but we're not picking it up on our scans. So we're going to call them dead. I can see the conflict there.
Rena, you look like you wanted to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, I unfortunately had a cousin who had this happen. We were both pregnant at the same time, and after delivering her daughter, she had an aneurysm and then ended up in a vegetative state about 3 days after. And I've never forgotten my experiences with head injury early on, and the racial disparity that's there. I wonder too, like for Jahai, if her family, again, being people of color, if their distrust of the medical community is part of it as well, you know, because of the racial disparity in treatment. When I think about my cousin, her husband was a wealthy executive and was able to demand care and take her home and have 24-hour care. And she was in the same position. There was no, she was brain dead, you know, but because, you know, they had money, she had her own special wing at the home and they had 24-hour care, and she lived for about 7 years with no change in her function whatsoever. Her daughter grew up. It's a strange thing, and it's a strain within our family because some of those siblings really wanted her to just, you know, find peace and be let go. And the mother, very religious, and again, you know, the husband had money, and you know, they were able to do that. But I remember working downstate in the Detroit area at a nursing home at a SNF, and they had a young kid who was shot in a you know, gang activity, and he was housed. You know, friends came a little bit and then they didn't. It was real difficult to see, and I just thought, you know, it never left me when this happened with my cousin. The racial disparity, the expectation from families, depending on where you're from and your experience with that community. So I don't know.
I think those are no, I think those are really good points. And interestingly, Jahai's grandmother was an RN, and she was in the hospital, and she's like, this is not going well. She was trying to advocate, and she really felt that they were not respecting her and believing her expertise. And I think those cultural factors, those diversity factors, you know, people's historical experience with the medical system, all of that weighs in.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys have brought up, you know, this golden rule too in this conversation, that it's really hard when you don't, you know, what you decide or how you feel is different depending on where you are. One, just kind of your view of quality of life, and you know, the different dynamics in a family. Like you said, you know, someone who has a really strong religious faith, and others who have seen what this kind of lifestyle will look like for her when she doesn't have any functioning. It just creates so many difficulties and so many things to kind of, you know, really consider. It is, it's very challenging. I mean, these things are not easy situations. I do think, based on kind of what we were saying before, if we were just looking at the messaging of hospitals, we would certainly like, you know, Michigan's message better than the UCLA message, right? So at the very least, we can think about how we are communicating information, and we all need to improve on that. But whoever mentioned MDs, you know, too earlier, you know, that is really something that's really important. So, you know, had these hospital systems maybe gone through this messaging, or if there had even been, I think sometimes these decisions are made on an individual level, right? Instead of bringing it's, you know, each of these cases were probably went to an ethics review board, not initially, right? Because this is a day-to-day clinical decision making, but maybe we would have thought about these situations differently. And interestingly, Beaumont really took a different tact, right? The first two hospital systems said, we're not providing care. And Beaumont took a different tact and said, yeah, we'll put in the PEG tube. Yeah, we'll put in the trach. So what do you think about that? Like did they learn maybe something from a different situation? Is it just that they have a different consideration? What do you guys think about that?
Well, I can say from my own experience through Beaumont is that they did the same for my dad. They did put a tube and a trach until we knew there was nothing left and we had it all pulled. But Maybe it's more as a palliative care approach with the family to help ease them into the decision-making of what's going to be next. And that's good. That's good, because again, it's that sensitivity. It's helping the family get through this.
Yeah. We had an individual, he had a huge MI and came to us with a big anoxic brain injury, and probably had the most impressive wife in terms of her coping strategies, in terms of her faith, in terms of, I mean, she was, God forbid I'm ever in that situation. If I could take her as a model and be half as good as her, I would be happy, right? She just was wonderful and was coping, you know, as best as she could. And that was her kind of concern, because he had gone out to the hospital, he had a complication, and she was sitting in, I don't remember if she said she was in the ED at the moment or the ICU. And in the next bed over was another wife having to make a similar decision and saying, I just wish there was, she felt very pressured for the time. And my client, you know, was saying, take some time. It's okay. You never know. You never know. We've made some gains. You know, they told me I should have just disconnected him right then. And, you know, he ended up, they stayed with us for a while and transferred back closer to home. And he ended up passing shortly thereafter. But I think she needed that time to make the decision, right? Those pressured decisions make these situations so much more complicated. You know, they're really, really challenging. Anything else that you guys can think of? Any other concerns or thoughts on either, well, I guess those three cases? Okay, so I've got another ethical scenario, and this one's a little different. We'll call this one abducted from the Mayo Clinic. So we'll talk about this one. I'll give you the facts again. We'll talk a little bit about the case. So we all know the Mayo Clinic, right? Has a really good program, really good rehab program. It's a model system for TBI, for brain injury. It's got great rehab neuropsych programming. They're known for going beyond the call of duty. If anyone has known, you know, or had family members who went there, or had clients who went there, you know, they give you show up and you got an itinerary and you go to all your appointments, and they do good work, right? And so this is the same kind of thing where we are not going to know all the details. We are not going to know both sides of the story, but I will play this scenario for you here.
Alyssa Gilderhus and her family say they experienced the seemingly unthinkable. In this email to police, Alyssa's mother says her 18-year-old daughter was medically kidnapped by the world-famous Mayo Clinic.
Do you think they were trying to medically kidnap you?
Yes, I completely do. Not a doubt in my mind.
This was Alyssa on Christmas Eve in 2016 with her family in Sherburne, Minnesota. On Christmas Day, a blood vessel burst inside her brain. She had emergency surgery at the Mayo Clinic. Doctors gave her a 2% chance of surviving.
How did those neurosurgeons do? Fantastic.
Phenomenal.
They saved her life.
After a month, she moved to the rehabilitation unit at Mayo with new doctors.
When you had opinions or thoughts about Alyssa's care, did they listen to you?
No.
I don't feel they did at all.
Did they seem annoyed with you?
Yes.
Because we were parents, not the doctors, because they knew everything and we didn't.
The tension eventually exploded, and Mayo kicked Alyssa's mother out of the hospital after they say she interrupted a meeting. In a statement, Mayo told us family members may be restricted in situations where care may be compromised or the safety and security of our staff are potentially at risk. Alyssa's mother says she didn't do either. Alyssa begged for her mother. Family friend Joy Schmidt.
She'd cry.
Was that tough?
Very.
Alyssa says she'd finally had enough.
Did you want out of the Mayo Clinic?
As bad as possibly, yes.
But what happened next is alarming. Alyssa and her parents say Mayo wouldn't let her go.
Did you ask to have her transferred to another hospital?
We did.
And what did Mayo say?
They said no.
A lawyer even wrote this letter asking for an expedited transfer to another hospital.
It felt like you went from a healing place to a prison.
So Alyssa's parents hatched an escape plan. They pulled a trick on the staff to get her out of Mayo, and they documented it on video. They told them that Alyssa's grandma Betty had come to visit, but was too frail to come inside the hospital, and so Alyssa had to come to her. But when they arrive at the car, there's no Grandma Betty.
Come on, babe.
It's Alyssa's mother.
Going home.
Watch as a nurse's aide grabs Alyssa's arm.
Yes, she is. She signed out. Come on, honey, we're going home.
How did it feel the minute that you hopped into your parents' car?
Like a relief. Like the biggest weight on your shoulders pulled off. It was phenomenal. The longer I'm away from Mayo Clinic, the better.
After Alyssa left, Mayo called 911 and said they'd had a patient abduction. But Rochester police tell CNN that Mayo was wrong. They said Alyssa was 18, an adult making a legal choice to leave the hospital.
That there was no abduction, there was no violation of law. Essentially, you had a patient that left the hospital under their own planning with the assistance of family members.
Months later, Alyssa and her family learned a secret while looking at police records. Just before Alyssa escaped, a Mayo social worker had tried to get court orders for emergency guardianship for Alyssa.
If you had not gotten Alyssa out of the Mayo Clinic, where do you think she'd be right now?
She would not be in a good place.
I think it would have been the end of us ever getting to see Alyssa again.
So why was Mayo trying to get emergency guardianship for Alyssa? A county official told police that the Mayo Clinic was concerned for the medical decisions being made for Alyssa. Alyssa signed this privacy release form so Mayo could speak freely to CNN, but Mayo wouldn't answer our questions on the record. We will not address these questionable allegations or publicly share the facts of this complex situation because we do not believe it's in the best interest of the patient and the family. Our internal review determined that the care team's actions were true to Mayo Clinic's primary value that the patient's needs come first. We acted in a manner that honored that value for this patient. Alyssa and her parents think Mayo was trying to get guardianship in retaliation for questioning doctors.
Okay, so let's do some of that same practice, kind of the same way we did it before. So what do you think in terms of the front page test here? How do you think that played out in the news? Pretty poorly, right? Does anybody think Mayo looked good in the story? I'm seeing heads shaking no, right? Did anybody have concerns that there is more to the story, having worked in this field for a long time? Right? I mean, seeing Jan's yeses and other thoughts, right? Yep. So front page, not so good, right? This gets into some ethical issues in terms of quality of life, but also kind of thinking about values and things like that, right? For family. So the Mayo obviously didn't like something the family was doing. The family thought that they were not getting that information, which we talked about before. If you put yourself in the patient's shoes, right? What do you think? If you ever heard patients kind of say, hey, listen, they're not considering my opinion. I mean, that gets into some of these ethical concerns, right? So I know that I have certainly heard, and we talked about it with the last situation, patients say, well, they don't understand, right? I can think of an example. I was working in a hospital setting and the family was very concerned because their loved one was aspirating literally everything. And but they were very concerned because he kept talking about how he was hungry. And so they kept bringing in food. And they kept bringing in food. And the straw that broke the camel's back, we found out that they had brought in Doritos and a foot-long sub and fed all of that to him. Yes. It was a huge safety concern, right? And education had been provided over and over, but same thing, right? They didn't
I know this case.
Understand. You know this case?
I think I do. Mhm.
You might, and there might be multiples for all for all I know. But yeah, because families, they don't get it, but it becomes one of those. So there was discussion. What needs to be done, right, about a family member that seems to be causing risk? What are we going to do about these situations, which is kind of what it sounded like was going on here. Families, go ahead, Sarah.
I might have an unpopular opinion, but this young woman was 18 years old. Where does the right to make a decision, even if it's a poor one, with education come into play here? Her decision might not be my decision, but where's the line where I have to respect that I've given her all the information that I can, and I have to respect her freedom to make that choice as an American adult with certain liberties in tow, despite other things that might be going on medically? Where is that line? Do our health practitioners just have an authoritarian right to say, well, I know what's best for you, so you just have to do it, even if you're a fully functioning adult? I think there's some big concerns there that I would have, and I get wanting to provide the best care, but I also think that sometimes the best care is the best education, and then allowing for an individual to make a decision. Even, I know within my practice, there's a right to fail. I don't want to see clients fail, but they have a right to fail and learn from failure too. And I get this is a hospital setting where there could be larger consequences for failure, but still, where's the line of individual freedom to make those choices? I think some of that at least has to still exist even within healthcare.
And I take it she was 18 and she was her own guardian?
She was 18, yep.
And she was her own guardian.
That was part of the reason they were filing for emergency guardianship was, I think, that they were stating that she was not cognitively capable of making those decisions, and that they did not think, because she was 18, and that the family they weren't petitioning the family to take on that role because they didn't feel the family was appropriate. But yeah, that's a great point. So there does need to be that evaluation, right? Because I agree, Sarah, people have the right to make bad decisions. And that is a really hard part of brain injury. It's a place where you can learn, right? But convincing families that their loved one has a right to make a bad decision sometimes can be very, very challenging. But I think you're right. We need to have a way of determining, is this person able to make decisions for themselves? Are they capable of making those decisions at this point in time after a big aneurysm burst or whatever else went on?
Yes, but the other point is that they were in effect saying that the parents were not the people that should be her guardians. Mm-hmm. So when you see a case like this, it would be interesting to see the other side of the story, like the Mayo Clinic. It would be interesting to see what their reports say. Now, certainly to us, looking at this family, the parents seem perfectly capable of making the decisions for the daughter, but that they were going to try to get guardianship and obviously not choosing the parents, that's pretty low on Mayo's part. Mm-hmm. But it's always interesting to see the other side of the story. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, I think that, it's as people that are involved in rehab, we tend to be empathetic, and we tend to be careful about what we say and how we say it. But it seems like everybody's not like that. And certainly Doctors are not always like that. You know, it's unfortunate, but it is.
Yeah.
I think a concerning point to me was that the family wasn't just trying to remove her, they requested a transfer and it was denied. That's very concerning that they requested not just to yank her, but to say, we want another opinion from another obviously qualified facility, and for Mayo to say no to that, you would need some pretty profound evidence to me to justify that.
I agree with you. And I think that that's one of those things that you're like, well, why? Why would we not transfer? What's going on? So Kathleen mentioned like, it'd be interesting to know the other side. Later on, the information did come out from Mayo. And they said that mom was physically aggressive to the point where care staff, like direct care staff, was afraid to be in the room with the patient. And there were concerns that the patient had been abused prior to her aneurysm. Shortly after this all happened, there were some sort of CPS involvement in the situation, and Alyssa's younger half siblings were all removed from the house because of mom's verbal and physical abuse, and mom was found to be abusing drugs. So you wonder, how much of this information did Mayo have? Were they going on a gut hunch that something wasn't right, or was mom coming in obviously intoxicated and verbally and physically aggressive, and that was the reason? I think I had also read something that they actually approached the dad and asked him to do guardianship, and he was agreeable initially and then pulled out. So he might have been trying to save some face in that interview with his wife and say, no, that wasn't, I didn't get involved in that, and so does that change people's opinion of Mayo's actions?
It makes a difference if that's what was going on, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, as well, when the family said that the reason they thought Mayo wouldn't allow it was because they were taking revenge. I'm sorry, that Mayo is just too busy for that. I mean, I just can't see them wanting to take revenge. I can see them looking out for interest or even financial interest, but revenge, that didn't sit well with me when I heard the mom or dad say that.
Yeah. So these situations are just so complicated, and I appreciate all of you guys chipping in, because it's just so much to weigh, right? We have to think about, okay, what is the problem? What are all the facts? And are we considering that maybe we just didn't educate the family well enough? What do we need to do? So again, working through this is helpful. There are some specific issues to our group that's listening right now. So for nurses actually have a nice model, which is these steps in ethical decision-making for nurses. And one of the things that I really like about this model in particular at the end is that evaluate. So you took these steps, how did it work? Look at how that's working, and let's go back if we need to. How do we reevaluate, and what do we need to potentially change here? So that's an important part, I think, for that one. For those of you that are case managers, there were definitely a couple of you, right? There are, the CCM certification, was developed in 1996, and it was was revised in 2015, this code of professional ethics, and each group has their own ethics code, but if you are a CCM, this will count because we're talking about it briefly for you here. But there's these principles that, certified case managers are going to put the public interest above their own at all times. They'll respect the inherent dignity of their clients. They're going to maintain objectivity. And perhaps this is part of what Alyssa's parents were talking about, is maybe, at times rehab can be very frustrating, right? And if you are dealing with a verbally aggressive parent who is telling you you're a horrible person, and even though you know that they are making a lot of bad decisions, In those moments, sometimes it's hard to lose, we can lose our patients, or we can maybe be less objective. So we have to act with integrity and be objective at all times. We want to provide the highest quality of care, and, obeying all the laws. That's a pretty obvious one, right? That we need to be thinking about. There's no falsifying documentation, and this applies to all of us, right? These are things that we know will get you into trouble. That you have to follow your ethics codes, that your job is to be an advocate, to be a professional, because this is really a professional role, maintaining those good relationships and having confidentiality. All those things are really important things to kind of consider, and we're skimming over it a little bit because we have some other things that I want to make sure we touch on. But it's really important that we consider those ethics codes that we have. COVID has definitely brought up some additional ethical concerns. As a practitioner, even if you're not providing direct care, are you competent? So much of us move to telehealth, but you really have to think about whether or not you're competent to do telehealth, right? It's not quite as easy as it seems. There's additional things that you really need to think about in terms of getting that informed consent, right? I know when the world shut down, right, I did a lot of CEs on telehealth, and we had to really think about billing, all these sorts of things, confidentiality. So for example, if you're meeting with a client, whether it's clinical care or even just discussing their concerns, you've got this little square of my life. You don't know I could have my kids sitting right outside the doorway making faces at us, right? Or we can have clients that have manipulative family members, or clients who are saying, well, don't you dare disclose that I'm not giving you your medication so I can sell them for money, right? So we really need to think about those sorts of situations, what comes up. So I always ask at the beginning of all my sessions, is anyone else in the room with you? Or the other way to do that is there anyone else in earshot? Can anyone else hear what we're discussing? If you have a client where there could be potential safety concerns, or they just don't want, for teenagers, for example, who don't want their parents listening in, is there a little code word that they can drop so that to change the topic, right? All these things have to be kind of considered. We can use noise machines, white noise machines. We can use headphones so that no one else can hear maybe they can hear what you're saying if they're also all working in the house at the same time, but they can't hear the client's concerns. And there's just some of those boundary issues, that having a neutralish kind of background, at least, right? Having an answer. I had a client very early on in the pandemic ask me, I was working in the basement, and I was near the main stack, so where the water, drains, and I was running a load of laundry at the time. And she's like, why does someone keep flushing the toilet? And I had my earphones in, and that one caught me by surprise, right? Like, I was prepared for the, why is your dog barking? Oh, you have a dog, but, having those kind of pat answers, or those known responses, right? Is really important. And just, appropriate care, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, and let's hope not as our numbers are increasing, but, there was discussion that we had earlier about not providing care for a dead body, right? But what about withholding CPR to a client that's on a vent, right? The research really showed that if we're doing CPR on a client with COVID, we're much more likely, one, you're not very likely to be successful. And the AMA initially, with all this was going on, was saying you only provide interventions that are medically appropriate, but you're also responsible for providing care and not jeopardizing your entire medical staff. So there was we could make a whole nother presentation about ethics in COVID, really, and all the situations that came up. We talked earlier about, diversity kind of issues. There's certainly access issues for our clients that, don't have computers, or maybe they have a flip phone, and so they can't do telehealth with their providers when all of this was going on, or they don't they don't have unlimited minutes and they don't have Wi-Fi. You know, Detroit just put in some hotspots throughout the city and parks and stuff so kids can go and potentially sit in areas and get Wi-Fi so they can do online schooling. Now, a little late, right? But better than nothing. You know, what about for our clients that just don't have that time? For our clients with low vision, you know, this is not an easy way to communicate and have our services. And there's all sorts of other stuff too that we kind of think about, you know, if we have a training facility or if we've got, you know, an intern in, are they getting the clinical experiences that they need? Because maybe initially we weren't bringing people in, and how do we do data collection? There's just all these kind of considerations. So what do we do, right? So how do we create this ethical environment? We have some overarching strategies we're going to talk about. The first is really supporting your team and your coworkers from understanding ethics from their discipline's perspectives. There are sometimes little changes, or little differences. Social work, I believe, has a rule that you cannot Google your clients. You can't look them up on social media, things like that. There isn't anything like that in psychology's ethics code. Maybe they need to, you know, include something like that on their next updates. But, you know, so there's differences, and we really have to think about how we consider those differences when we have a difficult situation, like these big organizational decisions. And so to that end, while considering everyone's kind of ethical codes, all your clinicians, you can have a code of ethics for your organization as well. The Michigan Brain Injury Providers Council has a really good document called the Business Practice Guidelines. The BIAA actually just asked if they could use that for their guidelines at a higher level. You can use pieces of that when you're setting up guidelines for your company, your professional, even if you're just thinking about it for yourself, right? And then do you have the administrative structure in place so your staff knows what to do? What is your mission statement? What are your values? What policies do you have in place that define what actions to take place when these ethical situations come up? Have you spread the word? Do people know who to call, or they're just like, oh, this is going on, and it never filters up to the right people because they don't know that is done? You know, are your supervisors giving daily direction and pointing out those ethical situations? Because I think sometimes people just, they might not think that there's something they can do about it, and so they just let it be. So we need those resources for consultation, things like that. Ethical issues are common in our field, and so we do need to talk about them on a regular basis so people recognize it. Ethics can really turn into big regulatory issues. So there have been some big whistleblower lawsuits in the area. Beaumont actually had to agree to pay. They were fined $84 million because of these whistleblower lawsuits. That's about 2% of their revenue, but that is still a huge amount of money. And some of the concerns were, you know, they were providing free office space or, you know, perks, salaries, things like that. So they were talking about excessive compensation. The whistleblowers, now interestingly, whistleblowers get 15 to 25% of the fine. But oftentimes whistleblowers also report retaliation, right? So do you feel comfortable? And we're talking on a much bigger scale now, but do your employees feel comfortable bringing up the concerns that they see? And that's really important. The DMC was another one. So not just to pick on Beaumont here, because actually we were talking good things about them earlier, but the DMC self-reported some ethical violations. And so their fine was only 30 million, just a drop in the bucket, right? You know, creating that ethical environment. So having the ethical code of conduct, corporate compliance is really important. We have an open door policy. You can have similar things, you know, and you go in the bathrooms, there's my OSHA stuff, there's corporate open door policy and who to call when you have issues, you know, having compliance officers, all this sorts of stuff that I kind of already talked about for you. and that you do need people who understand these things, the Star Club, kickback statutes, False Claims Act, right? So basically, physicians can't make money from making referrals, right? You can't give gifts. You can't give people money to make referrals to you. You can't give patients gifts for picking your services. You can't falsify documents. That's pretty much all of us know that, right? But there's all these laws, and all of us know HIPAA pretty well too. But there are all these things that really address waste and fraud and ethical concerns, and we really need to think about them. In terms of safeguarding client rights, one of the things we have is a client bill of rights that our clients all get. It's talked about regularly with clients. So staff really needs to know these things too, right? If you get someone brand new, we don't want them putting somebody in a, strapping someone into a wheelchair when there's not, reasons for this and step and approved to, we don't want restraints that people just don't understand, or clients or, staff that takes away a client's phone, or family members that take away a client's phone because they've been calling them too much, right? That's a fairly common one. So we need to talk about those sorts of things. If we think about grievances that our clients make as a gift, right? That's information, and it's an opportunity for us to improve our program and strengthen it. We talked earlier about self-determination, that ability of clients to make bad decisions. And so we really want opportunities for decision-making. Our job is to keep clients safe a lot of times and to provide them with information. But sometimes people make bad choices, and that's sometimes just the way it is, right? So we need to think about all these things. Having really strong clinical leadership and people who reward you bringing forward these difficult topics is really good. We need to remember that, we talked about reimbursement issues, conflicts amongst the team, and the decision-making capacity are those top three issues. So, we really have to think that if we just think that those are issues, and then we layer brain injury on top of that. So our brain injury population, they might have cognitive concerns or communication issues, which make them less able to advocate for themselves, right? We might have a family member who's just chomping at the bit to get a piece of the settlement, right? So we need to think about all those kind of issues and discuss them on a regular basis, either through we call it our hot case committee, it's our ethics committee. You can bring in ethics consults, so that's certainly something you can do. We all know about utilization review now. That's something that we have to be sure that we are doing. There are healthcare law consultants as well, people who really specialize in this, who can work with you on, okay, what do you do in this situation? Because ultimately what's really important is that we need somewhere for our employees, for our colleagues, we need somewhere to go when we have that moral distress. Remember at the very beginning, we talked about that, right? When there is something that is not sitting right, when it is not right, we need that opportunity. And so the more you can put in these structures, the healthier your employee workforce will be, the healthier you will be, because you won't have that compassion fatigue, you won't have that stress, and hopefully you won't have that moral residue. You'll be able to address the issue head on. So that is all that I have for you guys. Do you have any concerns, any questions? Can I address anything?
I would like to say thank you, Carolyn. You
Oh,
are a
absolutely.
wealth of information, and I have so enjoyed this webinar. You are just great. Thank you for advocating and being supportive of all these individuals. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think this stuff is so, all of us get into this field because we want to help people, right? And these are the real life issues that we deal with on a day in, day out basis. So it's nice to give voice to them and hear that everyone's got similar thoughts.
And you work for Rainbow Rehab?
I do, yes.
Oh my God, I used to work for Rainbow Rehab from
Did you really?
1996. Yes, for 3 or 4 years.
Oh.
Is Bill Buckalow still your CEO?
He is still our CEO.
Oh my gosh, how cool. I just saw that now that you were Rainbow Rehab.
I'll pass along a message to you for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Any other concerns, questions, anything I can address for anyone? It's weird looking at my little headshot there, so I'm gonna go back a slide, right? All right, well, thank you guys all for your time. If you don't have, make sure your email is in the chat box if you want CEs. So you've got an hour and a half coming at you. I appreciate you guys giving up your Thursday evening. Thank you for coming, and we love talking about this stuff. So if you guys have anything else, please feel free to reach out. My email's there too, and Amy, I'm sure is happy to answer any questions that you guys have also. Let me make sure Amy, can I give them your email also? So Amy's is just amy.gelso, GELSO @Rainbow Rehab. So if you have concerns or if something goes wonky with your CEs, you can either one of us know.
And Sandy has our information. We've talked to her plenty of times.
Yeah. And thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
I definitely want to thank you for sharing all of your information. You are a wealth of information, and it was very, very good presentation. I wish we could do these darn things in person again so that we could actually see people face to face and say thank you and get to know each other. But again, yes, one day. And everybody, we're getting to the end of our time, but I want to make sure if there's anybody that has any announcements that you kind of went, oh shoot, I should have said that in the beginning. Please feel free to kind of unmute yourself and let us know what's on your mind so that we can share it.
I was going to say, this is probably an ethical issue that could be a whole other hour, but some of the issues coming up in July that we're going to have trying to find care for our clients. It's going to be
a huge issue.
Moral distress big time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, on top of the moral distress that I think that's going to bring, I don't know, one of the things we've been talking about a lot is there is a lot of just burnout. And I don't know how many of you guys are feeling that now, but there's just that exhaustion, right? Exhaustion, the feeling like you can't do enough. This has been a very challenging year. And so, to add some ethical issues on top of it, just make sure we're all doing our, self-care and consulting. And it's great that you guys have this regular meeting and opportunity to network, because we know that's one of the things that can help, is having those conversations.
All righty. Is there anybody else that has any comments, questions, concerns? We don't take complaints here, so just comments, questions, and concerns. Dana, it looks like you're talking, but you're muted.
Sorry about that. I think Steve alluded to it in the beginning, but that Martha Lewandowski was going to be sending some information, and you would post it for everybody on Senate Bill 4486. I'm sorry, House Bill 4486 and Senate Bill 0314, and that's about the fee schedule. What she's going to do, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, is ask everyone again to write in. There's 3 form letters in an email that she's going to send, and you can go on as a healthcare provider, as a community member, or as a patient, a survivor, and tell your story. But if you use one of their pre-written emails, you just punch in your name and address. It brings up your House member, your Senate member, and the governor. And you literally, within about 30 seconds, you can just send an email, or you can write your own. They are really encouraging everyone to not be nasty. That's not going to help the cause. Just either, tell about how, the fee schedule going into effect July 2nd will affect you and your clients. Try to get your clients or patients to go on there and write one themselves, or use the one that's already written. There have been 10,000 that have gone out. That was as of the CMSA meeting 2 days ago. Yeah. But the legislators, they haven't heard from enough of us, and that bill is not moving. They really need to hear from everybody, and it's so simple. It literally, if you don't write your own and use the one that's on there, it takes you about 45 seconds to do the whole thing. Steve, is that what Martha's going to be sending? Dana. You're welcome.
Actually, Dana, yes, it is. I texted her right after that meeting to ask her if she wanted to share with this meeting. And
okay.
She had another commitment, so she kind of did a videotape, and we just had a little technical difficulty. We couldn't get it open, and it's already in another meeting, so we said we would post it. But she also talked about the We Can't Wait initiative too, and just getting the word out, but also letting your clients know what's going to happen.
Kevin McKinney from from CPAN said that patients make a huge difference when they hear their stories, because it really brings it closer to home. A lot of legislators think that we're self-serving and just trying to save our jobs. What that means, though, obviously we all know there's been a 40-year infrastructure built to help patients and to navigate them through this worst time in their life and make them have a good life. And the legislators, they just don't seem to care. And the Senate Majority Leader, Mike Shirkey, said, we're just going to wait and see what happens after July 1st. And then, if we have to change things, well, everything will fall apart. Everything will fall apart if people have to take a 45% pay cut, if facilities and providers that don't bill Medicare or don't have a fee schedule. So it's we all know it's a mess, and just doing a small part by, it literally, like I said, takes a minute if you don't write your own and you use the one that's written on there. Certainly feel free to write your own or to edit that one,
Yeah, it's time to definitely be diligent about that stuff, because it, like Dana said, it's more for the people we serve. None of us want to see them suffer. Sorry, Beth, go ahead.
Are there two letters, one about the fee schedule and one about the family attendant care?
I think there is.
Yeah, I think that, there's, I can't recall. I did it like about 10 days ago. And
I think that there's two.
The attendant care is the one from families, I think. Isn't that, there's there's as soon as you log on, it shows you how do you want to be represented as a healthcare worker, as a community member, or as a survivor.
And
when you choose those,
I'm sorry, am I logging on to CPAN or to BINNMI?
Well, everybody, and Amy, I think you might be able to speak to this. Hi, Amy. We got one from you today too, a letter on the same thing, didn't we?
I did.
I mean,
email.
I've
Do you want to
written
elaborate?
myself, but I think with the urgency tomorrow, it might just be a functional task for every single person who comes into my therapy room. So
yeah, I think that's a great idea. Our staff, it's hard to get them to do stuff. They're busy, and they, I sent it out, and our respiratory therapists, within a half an hour, I kept saying done. I mean, it was that fast that you literally went on there in just a few seconds.
Nice. Okay, is there any other announcements? Everybody's clear on where to find those letters, and make sure we're getting them out, and stay diligent for the cause, for sure.
Thanks, Rick.
Does anybody else have any other announcements? Anything else to say?
Just thank you again, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll do one last ploy. If anybody knows an MSW that wants to get into some counseling and case management, just let me know. Beacon's looking to hire. It's really good to see everybody. Have a great night. Thank you so much for everything you do for the people we serve, near and dear to our hearts for many years. And hopefully we'll be able to do in person at some point. I miss everybody. So have a wonderful night.
You too.
All right,
Night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.